Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another session of ELTA's webinars series on masterclasses in legal tech and legal innovation. I am joined again today, as I am always, by Mr. Guido Assolf. My name is Dirk Blum. I am assisting the director of the ELTA Academy, Ms. Marisa Monteiro-Borsboom. I'm a young ELTA member. I hope to see more young ELTA members in the future also at the Academy. It really is an amazing series of webinars that ELTA is doing, an amazing initiative to try and get more in touch with the existing innovation and the happenings in the world. I really do encourage everybody to reach out if you have a topic idea, if there's something that you'd specifically like to talk about or hear about. Please do email us, please do reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. I especially want to see more young ELTA members. Joining us today then is Mr. Guido Assolf. I will leave it to Mr. Assolf to introduce himself, and then I will also just start the presentation over here.
Yeah, Dirk, thank you. I hope you hear me well because, I had some troubles dialing in today because I'm on another conference here in beautiful Salzburg. So I'm actually a lawyer based in the area of Cologne, Germany. I've been just like doing IT and IP law stuff since more or less 20 years. Been a product manager in a publishing or in a legal publishing company for a couple of years. So I'm very attached to, the fields of legal tech. Probably, I was working in one of the first legal techs back in 2008, but at that time, nobody was really referring to that term. So I'm really happy that you are joining today and that you are all here. Dirk, I just need a little bit of support switching through the presentation because that probably doesn't work over my mobile phone. But today we want to tackle the topic, the AI challenge, a little bit of strategy to implement AI in a legal tech environment, or let's say in a law firm or a legal department environment. Because there's so many things being said about AI being a, let's say, silver bullet to all the problems lawyers are facing in their day-to-day work, and we have a lot of regulation in front of us. So swiftly going through the agenda, it's starting with a brief introduction where we actually stand. Then I would say change is coming. Definitely, we get more and more technology using or in our day-to-day business as a lawyer. And this is certainly super important, not only for us being a professional, but also for the providers who try to solve legal problems and help us work more swiftly. So then I will just touch the problem with AI implementation and probably, the problems lawyers are facing because, I have the impression that a lot of lawyers still are a little bit conservative when it comes to using technology. And in my opinion, legal tech and especially legal AI will lead probably to new business cases when it comes to law firms, because you really have to overthink certain things. And I want to especially touch base on the regulatory side of bar associations, codes of conduct and stuff, because I feel that these are topics which are underestimated, and these are really, in my point of view, super important in order to cope with innovation in these fields. What is interesting, because we're on the verge of the AI Act coming into force, so it should be published within the next couple of weeks, so approximately at the 12th of July. So it's coming into force at most likely first of August. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. Although probably this might not be such a big challenge for us as legal professionals. And what we always have to bear in mind is that this is more or less a product safety regulation when it comes to the European Union. So it's a little bit awkward when it comes to other digital initiatives. So that is probably the legal background, but we really have to look, what bar associations, regulatory bodies, are teaching us about the usage of AI laws and AI tools, especially when it comes to hard fact legal work. So probably, Dirk, the next slide here. So the changes here already, I would say, from my perspective. So as I said, there are many people outside, and I was at the Legal Revolution conference just like a couple of weeks ago in Germany. And, there are more and more AI tools coming on the market. And there are a lot of, let's say, Gen AI tools in the market, such as ChatGPT whatsoever, which can be used or can be implemented in products. So the question for us as lawyers is always, is it really the silver bullet, or do we really have to consider a lot of different things? And generally speaking, what are probably fields of impact in the day-to-day work? So one thing can really be contract management, contract drafting, as well as knowledge management, and as well as compliance management. There are some big initiatives, probably you have heard about Aleph Alpha, which is one of the unicorns when it comes to AI software development here in Germany. And they're trying to develop AI tools in order to cope with DORA, especially the IT security regulations in the banking and finance sector. So there are probably a lot of fields where you can apply AI, and where you probably really have to think about what you really want to solve. And the question is, in my point of view, is it already the silver bullet for our work? So probably you have tried different, let's say, tools. And the question is always, what is AI capable of right now? So we will come back to some studies from the Stanford University, which looked specifically at the US market, at Gen AI models such as ChatGPT, but also at more specific AI tools with regard to the legal sector from I think LexisNexis and Reuters. So you will see in the slides later on that there are really differences in how proper these tools work. And the question is always, what is AI really capable of? By the means of being a statistic model and just like referring, the most, likely results which were trained in the model. So it's always a question about, what data got in and what will be the output. So I really think that as a company or legal tech developing AI tools, but also as a, let's say, law firm or legal department, you really have to get literate on the technology, on the transparency, and you have to get, ready for it in a way. It's something actually the AI Act in Article 4 is referring to when it says, you really should, your personal staff or your staff, your associates, whatsoever, shall get literate on AI, which is super, super important. And then we clearly have certain issues about, using AI in the legal fields. How about ethics? How about just like criminal law, like prosecution algorithms? So how do we deal with bias? And, how does the judiciary, think about, applying AI tools with regard to their findings? So this is really on the verge, and we really see that the change is coming right now. Dirk, next slide, please. And when we look at AI and legal design, sorry, it's just like a bad headline. That is not correct. But there are a lot of regulatory bodies who right now publish on the AI usage, and this is just like a quote from the Bar Association in for England and Wales. And the chair of the bar just stated on their webpage that the growth of AI tools in the legal sector is inevitable. And as the guidance explains, the best placed barristers will be those who make the efforts to understand these systems so that they can be used with control and integrity. Any use of AI must be done carefully and safeguard client confidentiality, maintain trust and confidence, privacy, and compliance with applicable laws. So we will see from a legal perspective, there are a lot of things which have to be considered when you choosing AI tools in order to support your daily work, actually. Next slide, please, Dirk. And when we look at legal AI systems, so we have just like different possible applications. So it's usage of large language models to leverage legal work. So if you ever tried, there are some fields where document drafting works pretty well. For instance, if you look at data protection information under Article 13 or 14, and if you just like looking for specific tools, even OpenAI and ChatGPT can be really helpful in order to draft just like paragraphs or special let's say information you would need to insert. But it's really depending a little bit on your tool which you're using. And I would always say you have to be aware that you have to double check the output of the system. So you have to be careful using it and carefully with regard to the output, because otherwise you will get to cases such as in the US where lawyers draft or attorneys drafted writs to the courts with made up decisions and made up references. So that is something you really have to bear in mind, and which you really have to implement a kind of governance how to work with legal AI systems. And there are probably applications which you see where lawyers implement or use legal tech products for, let's say, end customers, which can be legal departments, but can be customers as well. So there's a huge just like scope where you can use those technology. And the challenge really is understanding the technology. So not only the legal profession, but also the developers of legal tech applications have to understand technical challenges and the challenges, with regard to the work. So we will come later on to a few points where probably AI projects can fail. So you should always be pretty clear about the use case for what you want to use AI models and for what you want to use this kind of technology. And as I said before, this can really change your business model, because getting more efficient when it comes to your day-to-day work, this really can have an impact on billing policies. This can really have an impact, on staffing of the amount of, let's say, associates working for your law firm. And these tools are not really new, actually. There have been tools which check like documents with regard to their validity and what is in there since years, especially, when you refer to due diligences within M&A projects or something. This is really something which can substitute, let's say, human workforce. Otherwise, when it comes to the requirements the bar associations set up right now, it's not only stuff like confidentiality for the client, it's privacy issues you might have to face, transparency and explainability. So you most likely have to address to your client that you used AI tools for specific work you did for them. And so it's getting just like transparent, and then getting a point with regard to the applicable law. Dirk, next slide, please. So, as I said, the change of legal work, is coming if you consider using AI tools. So, as I said, this might really substitute legal work, especially, workforce for research or document checking, or let's say workforce when it comes to contract management and contract drafting. Although you really have to admit that most lawyers really have a kind of database where they have stored their best clauses for contracts. So this is something not new, but it's probably different because it might work much faster when it comes to standardization of just like contracting clauses or boilerplate clauses, which you're using all the time. So probably it's just like more, or it's getting more and more just like the drag and drop option, which you have, or which you have, especially in mass litigation, where you can compare documents. So in Germany, there's a lot of fuss about, let's say, damages with regard to data breaches right now. And there's just like mass litigation, for instance, against Meta for, let's say, scraping of content from the platform. And, the law firms handling these court cases, they apply, let's say, legal tech tools in order to see whether the opponent changes something in their argumentation, in their legal argumentation. And I would say that is really pretty helpful, and really has an impact on the work. And therefore, it will really have an impact on costs, which are usually quite high because you have usually a lot of leverage, in a law firm. So billing might be different in the future, because if you substitute just like human workforce from, let's say, or by using tech tools, the typical hourly rates probably will be abolished within the next couple of years, or will be, significantly less than the last couple of years. Although, as I mentioned, I would say that you always will have a need to probably have a second view by, some human lawyer in order to avoid bias and to probably have a better outcome and output when you use legal tech and AI. I was probably new for us as a lawyer. It's, you really have to think about adapting your business models, and we will feel the need to embrace technology in the future. So that are probably, from a really business perspective, important points. Next slide, please, Dirk. So, being a lawyer for more than 20 years now, I assume or I see law firms or problems with technology. So some anecdote from, a former firm I worked with. So we had a really senior partner in his 70s, and he was still working, it's just like 5 years ago. He was still only working with paper files. He didn't even have a computer at his desk. So if you see that, probably law firms tend to be more conservative than other fields. And I would say the younger, the practitioners are, the more open they are for new technologies. And it's just like a change of mindset. And it's getting literate on technology as well, because I would say you really have to know what you're doing, and you really have to have a plan. And it doesn't really matter if you develop technology or if you use technology in the legal fields in order to, let's say, get best results from the technology in use. And I would really recommend for both sides that you take a kind of risk-based approach, because what is hard to predict, because it's just like an evolving field, is how regulatory rules will develop. So we see that especially in the United States. So there are a lot of bars, such as we will see later, such as Florida, such as California, New York, Pennsylvania, who published kind of best practices or code of conduct for the use of AI tools. So you really have to be pretty aware that, as a lawyer, you will fall under these regulations. And, to my knowledge, there is no such thing really from a regulatory point of view in Germany. Dirk, I don't know how it is in the Netherlands, but this is really a field which develops right now. So you really have to have a clear view on your, let's say, regulatory bodies and the regulatory rules which apply to your specific jurisdiction. And this is important for, let's say, legal tech developments and legal tech companies as well, because if your product does not comply with these regulations specifically for lawyers, and then probably it's not explainable what the AI model is doing, it's probably a burden or a threat for your business model as well. And there are other specific risks when you look at a risk-based approach, which is on the one hand the bias of systems. So probably as a lawyer, you always have to make sure that your work is proper and is right from your legal point of view. So because otherwise it's just like a question of your own lawyer's liability. So this is typically something you really want to avoid. Bias and literacy are really key for both sides working with AI tools in the legal area. Next slide, please, Dirk. And when you see hard facts about all these code of conducts, you will see that there's this uncertainty by default. So we get new guidance on generative AI for the bar in England and Wales, which was published in January. We just had surveys which are published, as you can see in the source of Clio, according to a 2024 legal trends survey for mid-sized law firms. 31% of lawyers in mid-sized firms and 19% of lawyers in smaller firms believe that their bar association would never approve a law firm using AI-powered software. So you see how reluctant probably lawyers are, and how just skeptical they are about their own associations, allowing them to use AI tools. But you see, as I mentioned, clearly, especially California, Florida, Pennsylvania, you'll find a lot of information in the border of Maryland or whatsoever, which are setting up best practice rules for the use of AI, especially with regard to law firms and attorneys. So we're really getting a new framework for technology use in these fields, which you really have to bear in mind and which you really have to look at in the future. And some relevant points now on the next few files, where you can see what the specific bar associations or what their idea is, what you really have to fulfill as a lawyer. So Dirk, probably the next slide, please. So when it comes to the code of conduct and some examples to that, you have decisions in the US. For instance, I mentioned the US District Court for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania which just like helps standing order for counsels to disclose whether they have used generative artificial intelligence in the preparation of any complaint, answer, motion, brief, or other paper filed with the court, including in correspondence with the court. And one common theme among all jurisdictions right now is that have used or have issued guidance has been that while using AI, lawyers must not forget to adhere to their professional obligations and understand the pros and cons of AI technology. So that really makes it important to get literate in this field. And what are the bars saying specifically? So Dirk, early in the next file. So what it's all about, it starts with being truthful and accurate. Lawyers must ensure that AI-generated content, such as legal documents or advice, is truthful, accurate, and based on sound legal reasoning, upholding principles of honesty and integrity in their professional conduct. So in my point of view, you really have to know what the AI tool is doing, which you're using in order to, let's say, stick to these requirements. And secondly, the codes of conduct want lawyers to verify all citations and the accuracy of cited material. Lawyers must ensure the accuracy and the relevance of the citations they use in legal documents or arguments when citing legal authorities such as case law, statutes, regulations, scholarly articles. Lawyers should verify that the citations accurately reflect the content they are referencing. So it gives you the obligation to double prove the work. So probably AI tools will really help you, especially special legal AI tools, to make life easier for you, to draft documents, but you really have to double check. So there is still, let's say, typical legal work which is required, especially in a, let's say, trial court atmosphere or trial court proceedings, when you're just like working with the courts. Next file, please, Dirk. What the US bars want lawyers as well is assuring competence. Lawyers must be competent in using AI technology. We for sure have to maintain confidentiality. Lawyers must safeguard information relating to the representation of a client and ensure that AI systems handling confidential data adhere to strict confidentiality measures, and confidential data will not be shared with other clients or others, not protected by the attorney-client privilege. We have specific rules in Germany as well, which, set up the obligation to maintain confidentiality in a legal surrounding. So probably you need the permission from your client to use such tools, because otherwise, a breach of confidentiality and client confidentiality is considered a criminal offense in Germany. So you have to be pretty sure about what is the specific obligation in order to get probably these permissions to use tools in order to facilitate your work. Next point is identifying conflicts of interest. Lawyers must be vigilant in identifying and addressing potential conflicts of interest arising from using AI systems. And you should be pretty aware of what the AI system is doing. So from times to times, I see in the basic contracts clauses with regard to using content and legal content in order to train the AI model. Was kind of a scandal with regard to DocuSign, which used some specific contract documents uploaded there in order to accelerate their AI, let's say, model. So in that case, it's just like, first of all, knowing what your provider does, what's in the contracts, in order to safeguard not only your client interest, because it could be just like business secrets as well within a contract or whatsoever, and your obligations for confidentiality. So this is really key, understanding what the tool is really working, and you really have from a vendor side or legal tech vendor side, make lawyers comfortable on these points, and probably it's good to be not to be too proactive when it comes to using material in order to improve your AI models. Dirk, next slide, please. Transparency is key. So the US bars, when they're referring, have communication with clients in mind as well. So lawyers must communicate with clients about using AI technology in their practices, providing clear and transparent explanation of how such tools are employed and their potential impact on case outcomes. If necessary, they should obtain client consent before using certain AI tools. So this reminds me a little bit of data protection and regulation, and this kind of transparency, which is quite popular when you look at the AI Act as well, in order to provide good information and transparency on, let's say, the tool. So you as a developer or in a, let's say, developer chain are pretty sure what you're doing, and you can just like fulfill these transparency obligations. Next step is assuring information is unbiased and accurate. So lawyers really must ensure that the data used to train the AI models is accurate, unbiased, and ethically sourced to prevent perpetuating biases or inaccuracies in the AI generated content. This is pretty hard for probably a law firm using a third-party AI tool, because therefore, this really has to be super transparent, and you really have to be super frank and open with regard to the training in order to provide, or to provide the chance and the possibility for lawyers to double check. And to my lawyers, or to my knowledge, referring to the German market, there are not so many IT lawyers in the market. So if we would have to do that in Germany, that would really set a burden for using AI, because it really would set up a need for law firms to have more and more technical departments, which most likely the bigger law firms have. But the smaller the firm gets, I would say the less literate are they when it comes to the technology itself. So this unbiased or this bias check is really a burden for implementing AI tools in the legal surrounding. Dirk, next slide, please. Next point is really about literacy as well. So, one thought in these codes of conduct is ensuring that AI is properly used. So lawyers must be vigilant against the misuse of AI-generated content, ensuring it is not used to deceive or manipulate legal processes, evidence, or outcomes. Then, being a lawyer and being part of just like the judicial system makes it important to adhere to ethical standards. So lawyers must stay informed about relevant regulations and guidelines governing the use of AI in the legal practice to ensure compliance with these standards. And next point would be exercising professional judgment. Lawyers must exercise their professional judgment in conjunction with AI-generated content and recognize that AI is a tool that assists, but does not replace legal expertise and analysis. And I think this is a very important point, especially for the judiciary as well. If you look at the usage of legal AI in court cases, you will most likely have information in hand of prior case law, prior just like legislative rulings and stuff like that. So you always have to just like see if the bias strikes. So it's always good that I would say you double check with your human expertise what is the output of really a AI tool. Next slide, please, Dirk. That probably interesting for us lawyers from a business perspective, utilizing proper billing practices. Because the bar associations assume that AI has or might have tremendous time-saving capabilities, and lawyers must therefore ensure that AI-related expenses are reasonable and appropriately disclosed to the clients. So it would be a misconduct if you just like double bill the time which you usually needed to draft documents. But it gives you the option to just like rethink your billing policies and your billing methodology, probably by using fixed prices or fixed fees, which recognize or which bear in mind what the advantage of AI really is in your day-to-day work. Further to that, transparency is, let's say, a basic principle, especially when it comes to data protection in Europe, as well as AI regulation, and it's will be, let's say, super important for us lawyers as well. So, and in order to do that, the tools have to be explainable. because lawyers should be transparent with clients, colleagues, and the courts about the use of AI tools in legal practice, including disclosing any limitations and uncertainties associated with AI-generated content. And in order to do so, you need to know about the tool and the usage. Dirk, next slide, please. As a conclusion, in my point of view, AI will leverage the work in legal practice, so it can be super helpful with regard to drafting documents, contracts, to double check and to use for, let's say, knowledge management and research and legal research. So we're already seeing a shift here to what was formerly known as legal practice. When I started off it was just like 2005. It was not very digitized at that time, so it's really just like going through the roof in a sense. But from both perspective, from a legal tech provider, but also from the view of a lawyer or a legal department, regulatory questions still apply, and it's always a question of liability, how good the AI and the tool is performing. And being literate and being transparent on AI use will be super important in the future, because as a law firm, you really have to know what you're doing in these fields, as well as in the legal department. And this is not only with regard to the input, because if you're training your own AI models, always be sure about, what is your use case and what is the input for the training in order to get best outputs possible. And we surely want to avoid bias in the output, and the bars really want to avoid misconduct. And from a lawyer's perspective, you always want to avoid liability issues when using technology. Next slide, please, Dirk. So we just have a couple of minutes, so I try to rush a bit through the next slide. Looking at bias, so as I said, transparency is king. And what really happens if the AI LLM is biased? So it poses potential risk for your client, for your decision, for, let's say, if you're in-house, for your company, and you really have to think about just like a governance and a kind of AI compliance framework with regard to the use. And what is super essential, as I just mentioned already several times, is the tools have to be transparent. You have to be transparent, and you need to know what the tool is generating, and what are the benefits, and that what probably is the bias when you use such a tool. And the question is always, how can we avoid bias in a fast-moving, let's say, legal environment where legal content is really dynamic by new rulings from court, or probably super old precedent cases which still apply, which are from just like back in, let's say, 1950s or something. So this is really something a model or a trained model has to bear in mind in order to cope with bias. And next slide, please, Dirk. And if we look at that, Stanford University carried out some studies on the performance of AI models. It's still just like refining a bit, because there were some complaints on the studies, I think, especially from LexisNexis, and they looked at two use cases. First use case was really using Gen AI models such as ChatGPT, and they were not really performing so good according to, let's say, the studies carried out by Stanford University. And what is really interesting is that, you know, these more specific LLMs by LexisNexis and Thomson Reuters, you know, work more proper. So, you know, they really found a lot less bias in these more specific AI models. So you should be aware that, you know, you could probably use a generative LLM as a first go-to, but be pretty sure that you're able to double check in these fields. Next slide, please. So, if we look a little bit at the cases, you know, you might all be aware of, you know, these cases which were or which gone through the press, such as a Manhattan lawyer became famous for all the wrong reasons. So he submitted a legal brief generated by ChatGPT, and the judge did not take kindly the submission, describing an unprecedented circumstance. And the judge noted that the brief was littered with bogus judicial decisions, bogus quotes, and bogus internal citations. And the story of the ChatGPT lawyer went viral as a New York Times story, sparking none other than Chief Justice John Roberts to lament on the role of hallucinations. So this is clearly something you want to really avoid, and you know you will find good information at law.stanford.edu when it comes to these hallucination bias. Next slide, please, Dirk. So conclusion is hallucination rates are really alarming high for a wide range of verifiable legal facts, especially if you use Gen AI. And you know, they found out that performance really deteriorates when dealing with more complex tasks that require a nuanced and understanding of legal issues or interpretation of legal text. And you know, generic LLMs show a tendency to perform better with more prominent cases, particularly those in or from the Supreme Court. And hallucinations are most commonly among the Supreme Court's oldest and newest cases, and least common among later 20th century cases. According to Stanford University, this suggests that LLM's peak performance may lag several years behind current legal doctrines, and that LLMs may fail to internalize case law that is very old but still applicable. And what they've really found out is that, you know, if you go to minor courts, you know, that is always a case where Gen AI hallucinates more than on prominent cases. So this is really something to bear in mind when it comes to the user's usage of Gen AI tools. Next slide, please, Dirk. So then, you know, if you really want to develop a strategy, I would say, as always, planning and design is really key. So initiate and plan your legal AI initiative. And, you know, there are some reasons why AI project might fail in this planning and design phase. So always look at the scope of your project. If that is too big, that is usually, you know, a burden. Another burden is, you know, if the project scope increases rapidly within the project and within, you know, the implementation phase. So this is something you probably should avoid in this area as well. As we've seen, you know, AI shall be explainable. So if the model is not explainable, you will facing problems. Same with the model is too complex, and same with, you know, the project doesn't really solve the initial legal problem which you're planning to solve. So that is why planning is key. And you really have to take, these regulatory prerequisites from the bars into your consideration when planning an AI project, when planning to just like buy anything or to contract with an AI partner. So these are really important steps you really have to take. Last 5 minutes. Let's try to speed up a little bit. It's just like three slides left. I would say this is pretty easy. If you go to the next slide, Dirk, it's just like executing the plan. It's always deploying the right people to the right tasks, making task assignments and delegation authority effectively, giving timely, objective, and specific feedback, managing the team performance, dynamics, and morale, and ensuring collaborative teams and get rid of impediments. This works within, the legal framework. So if you apply AI, but especially when it comes to the development of your own AI tools. Next slide, please. And why expectation management is so important. Management of expectations and business requirements is key. And that is why you should, as a lawyer, be literate when you start a AI project. And AI is a living organism. As a legal practitioner, you have to really be able to assess inputs and outputs and the AI system as well. And you really have to define and work on your use cases. So you have to be pretty sure, what your specific use cases are and where you want to leverage AI in order to help you with your day-to-day work. Last but not least, next file, please. The problem with the fat tail, with outcomes and AI projects might be very specific and different. So statistically, a lot of projects fail with regard to time frame and costs and to the output. So if that is not sufficient, you spend money, you spend time, it doesn't really help you. And this is really, something we want to avoid. And that's why I would suggest, apart from the fat tail distribution, keep risks lower by good planning and fast implementation, and having a good just like overview, which I hope you have now after our masterclass with regard to the legal requirements and the regulatory requirements, and probably with regard to the designing of a tool in order to get better tools in the market to enhance our legal work and to make life easier for everybody, the legal tech scene, as well as, the guys applying legal tech to their day-to-day work. Thanks. Last slide, please, Dirk. Thanks for your patience and thanks for joining today. Sorry again for the little time delay we had this morning due to technical reason. And we're always happy if you have questions, please post them into the chat so we can just like look at it afterwards as well. So many thanks for me and many thanks for your patience.
Thank you very much, Guido. I'm going to start the recording now, but I just wanted to say this was an excellent masterclass, and I want that to be on the recording so that everybody else also knows it.